You won't believe what just went down at one of the world's biggest airlines. Picture this. Big Shaq's mom, a woman who deserves nothing but the best, walks up to the counter, ready to take her seat in style. But instead of being ushered to the luxurious seat she's accustomed to, she's turned away. What? Yes, that's right. In a jaw-dropping twist, a simple request for a VIP seat turns into a full-blown fiasco. But here's the catch. No one at the airline has any clue that her son is the one running the entire operation. Now, I know what you're thinking. How could this happen? How could someone who's literally the face of the company be treated like just another passenger? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to get all the answers you've been waiting for. We'll dig into behind-the-scenes drama, the jaw-dropping moments, and uncover the mystery of how Big Shaq's own mom was caught in the middle of a situation no one saw coming. As we go deeper into this unbelievable story, I want you to think about this. What would you do if you were in her shoes? Or even in Big Shaq's shoes? Seeing your own flesh and blood treated like this? The tension is real, and it's only going to get more intense. Keep watching, because you're about to find out exactly how this all goes down and how Big Shaq makes his move to save the day. Stay tuned. The best part is just around the corner. I'm glad you're sticking around because this story only gets crazier from here. But before we dive deeper into the drama, let's backtrack a bit. Big Shaq, known for his larger-than-life personality and his iconic rap career, might be the last person you'd expect to run one of the most successful airline empires in the world. You see, while the world saw him as a comedian and musician, there was another side to him that no one knew about. Behind the scenes, he had been quietly building his own airline from the ground up, a move so low-key and secretive, even his closest friends had no idea. His venture into the aviation world wasn't just about flying planes. It was about creating an empire that would change the way we travel. But what happened on that fateful day, when his mother was denied the luxury seat she had every right to expect, was not only embarrassing for her, but also put his entire business under the microscope. You see, the airline industry is cutthroat. There's a level of competition and bureaucracy that most people can't even begin to understand. But for Big Shaq, the stakes were much higher. This was personal. His company, which had grown to rival some of the largest players in the field, suddenly found itself in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. Imagine the internal chaos that ensued as word of the incident spread like wildfire. Inside the airline, no one could believe what had happened. Big Shaq's reputation was built on excellence, a reputation that was now being questioned because of a mistake that shouldn't have even been possible. But here's where things take a wild turn. The staff members involved in the incident were not just your typical employees. They were highly trained, handpicked from a pool of applicants who were supposed to be the best of the best. So why did they fail so miserably? That's the question everyone in the company was asking. As the story of Big Shaq's mom being denied the luxury seat made headlines, the public reaction was a storm in itself. People began to dig deeper, and soon enough, speculation about the company's internal workings started to spread. Was there something more to this? Was there a deeper reason for the failure that no one was willing to talk about? Those were the kinds of questions floating around, and they weren't going away anytime soon. What made things even more intriguing was the fact that no one could really figure out who was behind this slip-up. Some people whispered that it was just a simple mistake, but others suspected sabotage. And who better to target than Big Shaq himself? If someone wanted to bring down his empire, this was the perfect way to do it. While all of this was going on, Big Shaq's mom remained in the dark about the full scope of the situation. She had no idea that the story of her denied luxury seat was causing so much tension. To her, it was just another frustrating part of air travel. But for Big Shaq, it was something much bigger. The pressure to resolve this issue and restore the company's reputation was mounting. The phone calls came pouring in from every direction, the media, investors, even some of his closest friends, all asking what had gone wrong and why his mother had been treated like a regular passenger. Now, let's take a moment to look at things from the perspective of the airline staff who were involved in the incident. To them, it was just another routine day. But as soon as Big Shaq's name was mentioned, they realized something wasn't right. They had no idea who he really was. They only knew him by his public persona, the one who made everyone laugh with his rap songs and comical antics. They didn't know about the business mogul, who was quietly running an empire from behind the scenes. But as soon as the truth began to sink in, they found themselves in the middle of a situation they were woefully unprepared for. How were they supposed to handle a mistake of this magnitude? And more importantly, how could they make it right without losing their jobs? The subplot thickens when one of the airline executives, who had been with the company for years, becomes suspicious about the incident. She begins to wonder if the denial of Big Shaq's mom was part of a larger, more insidious plot to undermine the company's success. Was someone inside the company working against them? She starts digging deeper, searching for any clues that might explain why the situation spiraled so quickly out of control. But as she gets closer to the truth, she realizes that things aren't as simple as they appear. There are too many moving parts, too many people with their own agendas, and too many secrets being kept for comfort. Meanwhile, Big Shaq's mom remains unaware of the chaos unfolding around her. She's just going about her day, oblivious of the fact that her simple request for a luxury seat has triggered a chain of events that could change everything. She may be the heart of this story, but the truth is, she's also the unwitting pawn in a much larger game. She's a mother who only wanted a bit of comfort, but what she got instead was a front-row seat to a battle for control over an empire. The tension continues to build as Big Shaq himself gets involved. He's furious. This wasn't just a mistake. It was an attack on everything he had worked for. He knows that he needs to take swift action to fix the situation, but the question is, who can he trust? His inner circle is loyal, but even they are starting to show signs of doubt. Could one of them be behind the mess? Or was this just a case of bad luck? The plot thickens even further as a rival airline catches wind of the situation. They see this as an opportunity to strike. If they can expose Big Shaq's company's weaknesses, they'll have the upper hand in the ongoing battle for market dominance. The stakes have never been higher, and the pressure on Big Shaq is mounting. As we draw closer to the end of this part of the story, the tension is palpable. The mystery of who was behind the denied luxury seat is far from solved, and the deeper we dig, the more questions arise. Who is pulling the strings behind the scenes? What is the real reason for the incident? And most importantly, how is Big Shaq going to handle the crisis that's unfolding right before his eyes? Stay with us, because the answers to these questions are just getting started. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Keep watching, because the story is far from over, and things are about to get even more intense. The tension within Big Shaq's airline was palpable, but what was about to unfold would throw everything the company had worked for into complete chaos. Despite the external media frenzy and the internal pressure mounting, there was still one glaring question no one could seem to answer. Why had Big Shaq's mother been denied the luxury seat? Was it just a simple mistake, or was there something much darker brewing beneath the surface? The entire ordeal began as a small incident, but now it was escalating into something much larger, a full-blown crisis that could potentially ruin everything Shaq had built. Big Shaq himself was seething with anger. Every call he made to his top executives was met with promises of an immediate investigation, but nothing seemed to quell his frustration. The boardroom meetings were tense, and whispers of sabotage began to circulate behind closed doors. He had always prided himself on building a transparent, customer-focused company, but now it seemed that his empire was on the brink of collapse. Every employee from the ground crew to the high-level executives was on edge, knowing that one wrong move could bring down everything they had worked for. They had no idea that the drama unfolding with Shaq's mom was only the surface of a much deeper conspiracy. But it wasn't just his company's future at stake. Big Shaq's reputation, built painstakingly over years of hard work, was now teetering on the edge. The media didn't care about the intricacies of the airline industry. They only cared about the sensational headline. The story of a celebrity's mother being denied a luxury seat was too good to pass up. Rumors spread that Big Shaq had lost control of his own business, that his operations were a chaotic mess, and that the staff running his airline were incompetent at best. That narrative was exactly what his competitors were hoping for, and they wasted no time exploiting the situation. Meanwhile, the airline's internal investigation revealed unsettling details. The staff involved in the incident had a history of negligence, but it seemed too coincidental for Big Shaq to ignore. How had they failed to recognize who his mother was? They were trained to recognize high-profile customers and prioritize them. So why was his mother treated like an ordinary passenger? That wasn't just a simple mistake. It was a breach of protocol. But the more Big Shaq looked into the incident, the more he realized that there was something much more sinister at play. The denial of his mother's seat wasn't the only sign of disruption within the company. Financial discrepancies began to surface, small, seemingly insignificant errors that added up to something far more dangerous. At the same time, the rival airline that had been quietly watching the chaos unfold finally made its move. They leaked confidential information to the media, casting doubts on Big Shaq's airline's operational capabilities. The story spread like wildfire, and suddenly, the trust that had been carefully built with customers began to erode. Shaq knew his next move had to be strategic. This wasn't just about fixing a PR nightmare. This was about saving his entire business from the jaws of destruction. As if that weren't enough, a new character entered the fray, an anonymous whistleblower who claimed to have inside knowledge about the events surrounding the denial of Shaq's mother's luxury seat. The whistleblower sent a cryptic message to one of Shaq's most trusted executives, hinting at a deep-rooted conspiracy within the company. The message didn't make sense at first, but it was enough to raise the alarm. Who was behind this? Who had planted the seeds of distrust that had now sprouted into a full-scale corporate war? And most importantly, what did they want? Big Shaq was forced to dig deeper into his own company's operations than he ever had before. He started looking into every employee's background, reviewing every contract, and analyzing every decision that had been made over the past few years. What he uncovered was shocking. There were whispers within the ranks, rumors that pointed to a much larger conspiracy, one that involved not just a few rogue employees, but also higher-ups who had been compromised. It seemed that someone within the company had been playing a long game, sowing seeds of discord and slowly dismantling the very foundation of the airline. The deeper Shaq dug, the more dangerous it became. He knew that whoever was behind this wasn't afraid to get their hands dirty. With every new piece of information he uncovered, the web of deceit grew wider and the stakes climbed higher. But the twist, the one that would change everything, came when Shaq finally received the full report on the financial discrepancies. The numbers didn't lie. Someone had been funneling money out of the company for months, and the most shocking part, it had been happening under his very nose. The money wasn't just being stolen by employees. It was being funneled into the accounts of one of Shaq's competitors. The rival Airline, which had been circling like a vulture, wasn't just capitalizing on his downfall. They were actively helping orchestrate it. The conspiracy was far larger than anyone could have imagined. But why? Why would someone inside Shaq's organization betray him like this? What was the motive? Was it just greed? Or was there a deeper, more personal vendetta at play? And perhaps the most chilling question of all, who was the mastermind behind this corporate sabotage? Was it a single individual pulling the strings? Or was there a larger network of people involved, each with their own agendas? While Shaq was wrestling with these terrifying revelations, his mother was still blissfully unaware of the escalating chaos surrounding her. She had been interviewed by the media about the incident, but her answers were innocent and straightforward. To her, it was just a minor inconvenience. She didn't realize that the entire airline world was watching and waiting to see how Big Shaq would handle the crisis. Every move he made would be scrutinized, every decision analyzed for a potential to either save or destroy the empire he had worked so hard to build. The tension in the air was palpable as Shaq called an emergency board meeting. The clock was ticking, and every second that passed brought them closer to the edge. He needed to act fast, but with so many unanswered questions, it was difficult to know who he could trust. One thing was clear. If he didn't find the culprit soon, the damage could be irreparable. The airline was on the brink of collapse, and the reputation he had spent years building was hanging by a thread. In the midst of the storm, Shaq made one final, desperate decision. He would go undercover. Disguised as an ordinary customer, he would board one of his own flights and observe his staff in action. He knew it was risky, but it was the only way to get to the bottom of the mystery. He had to see for himself who was loyal and who might be part of the conspiracy. Little did he know, this decision would lead him into the heart of the storm, a storm that was far from over. As the final hours before his flight ticked away, Shaq prepared himself for the most dangerous game he'd ever played. The pieces were in place, and soon the truth would come to light. But would it be the truth he was hoping for, or would it be the final nail in the coffin of his empire? Stay tuned, because the twists and turns are only going to get wilder from here. Big Shaq's undercover mission had begun. Disguised as an everyday customer, he carefully boarded one of his own airline's flights, slipping past the usual security and oversight protocols. His goal was simple: observe his staff, learn the truth about the inner workings of his company, and uncover the roots of the conspiracy that threatened to undo everything he had built. As he sat in his seat, the hum of the plane around him felt oddly calming, as if the world were on pause, waiting for him to make the next move. It was ironic, really. Here he was, a man who had built an empire from the ground up, yet now he was forced to sit quietly, like a mere passenger, at the mercy of his own employees. The flight proceeded without incident, and Shaq's observations seemed to confirm his worst fears. There were lapses in protocol, disorganization, and signs of unspoken tension among the crew. But there was one crew member whose actions seemed particularly strange. She was a flight attendant, one who had been on staff for a while, but had always remained somewhat in the background. Shaq noticed her demeanor, a calm exterior that seemed to mask something deeper. She was always just a little too aware of everything that was happening, a little too alert for someone who had been in the role for so long. It was almost as if she knew what was going to happen before it did. When the flight landed, Shaq followed her discreetly through the terminal, staying a few steps behind. He needed to see what she was up to understand if she was involved in conspiracy that had already torn to the heart of his business. As he trailed her, he overheard a phone call she was having with someone on the other end. Her voice was low, but the words were unmistakable. "The plan is in motion. We've got the board on our side. It's only a matter of time before everything falls into place." Shaq's heart raced. It wasn't just an inside job. It was a full-on corporate coup. Someone had infiltrated the highest levels of the company and had been working systematically to sabotage him from the inside. The pieces clicked into place. The flight attendant wasn't just a random player. She was a key figure, one of the masterminds behind the entire operation. But who was she working with? Who was orchestrating this grand scheme? Before Shaq could confront her, the flight attendant disappeared into the crowd, leaving him standing there, stunned and overwhelmed. He couldn't make the mistake of acting too hastily. Every move he made now had to be calculated. The conspiracy was deep, and if he wanted to stop it, he needed to go back to the top, back to the board, to the very people who were supposed to have his back, but had clearly been compromised. Returning to his office, Shaq immediately began digging into his company's financial records again, this time with a sharper eye. What he found was a trail of breadcrumbs that led straight to one of his most trusted executives, the head of operations, someone he had known and relied on for years. Shaq's stomach sank as he pieced together the damning evidence. The man he had trusted, the man who had helped him grow the airline from the ground up, was the ringleader of the conspiracy. It all made sense now. The financial discrepancies, the sabotage of high-profile customers, the whispers of discontent within the staff. It had all been part of a larger plan to seize control of the airline. The head of operations had been feeding information to the rival airline, undermining Shaq's leadership at every turn. His ultimate goal was to force Shaq out and take over the company for himself. But Shaq wasn't done yet. He had one last card to play. He called a meeting with his board of directors, requesting an emergency session to address the mounting crisis. As the board members gathered around the table, Shaq stood at the head, his demeanor calm, yet filled with an intensity that was impossible to ignore. He knew this would be the moment that determined everything. He had to expose the truth, but he also had to protect his company and the legacy he had spent years building. The meeting started with the usual pleasantries, but Shaq didn't waste time. He laid out the evidence, one piece at a time, exposing the treacherous plot that had been carefully orchestrated behind his back. The room fell into stunned silence as Shaq named names, pinpointing the board members who had been in on the conspiracy and the executive who had masterminded the entire plan. The room was electric with tension, but Shaq's voice was unwavering. He had the truth on his side, and he wasn't going to let it be buried. As the evidence mounted, The board members who had been compromised slowly began to shift in their seats. Some looked ashamed, others defensive, but none of them could deny the facts that were laid bare before them. The head of operations, who had been so confident in his ability to manipulate the system, was now exposed to the traitor he truly was. The board members, one by one, realized that their own interests had been hijacked by greed and power. They could no longer ignore the truth. But just as it seemed that the tide was turning in Shaq's favor, the unexpected twist came. The head of operations stood up, his face a mask of calm, and with a slow, deliberate smile, he revealed the final piece of the puzzle. "You think you've won, Shaq? You think this is over?" His voice was laced with a dangerous calm. "You're too late. The airline's been sold. The deal is already done." Shaq's heart dropped. The entire company had been sold out from under him, and he hadn't even known. The board members, now completely silent, had been in on the deal. They had all been paid off, their loyalty bought with promises of wealth and power. Shaq stood frozen, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on him like a suffocating force. He had been too focused on conspiracy within the company, too distracted by the sabotage, to see the bigger picture. He had lost everything. But just as the weight of the situation threatened to consume him, a voice broke through the tension. It was his mother, standing at the door, her presence unmistakable. "Shaq, you've done enough," she said quietly, her voice steady. "This wasn't your fault. You built this from the ground up, and it's not over yet." Shaq turned to her, his mind reeling. Her words, simple as they were, gave him a sense of clarity. She was right. It wasn't over. Not yet. He had lost a battle, but the war was still very much alive. With his mother's support and the strength of his loyal employees, Shaq began to plan his next move. The airline might have been sold, but he wasn't done fighting for what was rightfully his. The final showdown wasn't just about regaining control of his company. It was about proving that no matter how deep the betrayal ran, the spirit of resilience would always triumph in the end. Shaq wasn't just a businessman. He was a man of integrity and strength, and he would rebuild from the ground up. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of inner strength and resilience. Until next time, stay strong, stay brave, and never forget your worth.